Thank you, Excellency. Guten Abend, good evening. It's a matter of great pleasure for me to be here tonight amongst this very distinguished audience. I just met some, my important former president, former prime minister, and I'm sure we have very many members of intelligentsia here. And I'm also very pleased that today I would not be talking much about politics. I would focus my talk today on what we have in Pakistan as a tourist destination, as a place where the world can do business, an emerging economic powerhouse, and a beautiful cultural expression of South Asia. Like the Malaysians say, Malaysia is the true Asia. Pakistan is the place which was the cradle of civilization, not just for Asia, but the entire world. Three of the oldest civilizations in the world, one of the three, was what we call today the Indus Valley civilization. Indus Valley is exactly that part of South Asia, what also some people used to call the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent, which roughly can be juxtaposed on today's Pakistan. Because Indus was about the river Indus. From the snows of Karakoram and Himalayas down those flowing waters, going down to the Arabian Sea, there were these major rivers. And that's what comprised Punjab, for instance, which means the land of 5 rivers. And a great civilization evolved around those natural river system. That civilization was so advanced in its time that some manifests of the civilization that we see today, for example, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, these cities, and I'm very glad to mention that there are very many German scholars who have devoted their entire lives on doing research work there. What our research tells us is that civilization, and we can see that the ruins are still there. In Mohenjo-daro, for instance, and Harappa, they had running water. They had a system for running water. They had a system for drainage. And just imagine, we're talking about 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years ago. In Europe, even 500 years back, big part of Europe did not have running water or drainage. So you could see how advanced that civilization was. Unfortunately, it was wiped out subsequently. And the researchers still have to agree on what exactly happened. But the point is that tradition continued in terms of course, the empire or the states can be wiped out, but the tradition and the culture lives on. So that culture produced, for instance, the textiles. It started there in the Indus Valley. For instance, a lot of arts, this whole, these epic stories of Ramayana and sort of, like what comprises many religions today, it all emerged from there. Great traditions of music and arts that we find in what is Pakistan today, in parts of India and Sri Lanka and other countries, and even these all the way to Southeast Asia emerged from there. And then again, you see, like, as we move on from there, then historically this land, what comprises Pakistan today, This has been a melting pot for different civilizations. The Arabs came before them, the Greeks, Alexander, passed through this region and left his mark. Then the Persians, then the Central Asians, the Turks, then the Europeans. And you find imprint of all those eras in today's culture and today's society that we have there. The advent of Islam, of course, the long rule of Muslims in India. It all started there. Places like Khyber Pass, that's where all the invaders have come to. All the invaders who subsequently built empires in what was the greater India then. So the point is, it's this type of a history. And you find that, like a string of pearls, you find the remnants of that history everywhere. There are forts, there are temples, there are mosques, there are palaces, there are ruins from the Buddhist times, for instance. In fact, Pakistan is probably some of the most important of those. Then, the Hindu period, the Sikhs, some of their most sort of respected and cherished religious places are in Pakistan. Same for Buddhists. So that history is there to see. And it is a history which is in many ways much deeper than the history that you find in Europe. Why? Because it's started much, much before. Then again, if you talk about the traditions of music and arts, again, they date back to thousands of years. So the richness, because the more time passes, more enriching a culture becomes. The language that we speak in Pakistan, there are many languages in Pakistan, but the most prominent one is called Urdu. Now, the beauty of that language itself shows you the beauty of Pakistan in many ways. For instance, the language Urdu is a Turkish word, Urdu, which means army. So it was actually started as the language of the army, one army of the sort of, let's say the Mughals, which comprised many, many different sources. Urdu has thousands of words of Persians, thousands of words of Turkish, thousands of words of Sanskrit, thousands of words of Arabic, and perhaps thousands of words of English as well, all assimilated. If you speak Urdu, you will not have any problem speaking to anyone in the entire north of India where they speak Hindi, because they are very similar language in speaking, although in writing very different scripts. So that is the social, the cultural kind of, layout of the country. Now let me talk about the physical beauty of the country. Pakistan is a big country compared to many European countries. It's twice the size of Germany, for instance. It has some of the highest mountains in the world, some of the most majestic auras that you can imagine in the north, where Pakistan meets China, northeast. Then the region of Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, the valley of Hunza, from where our esteemed governor, who's here, and I'm very pleased that he could make it today, and his lady wife, they come from. An amazing history. And that part, if you go there, and I've read Western commentaries which say that nowhere in the world you would find such majestic peaks. To give you an example, in Europe, the highest peak in Europe is Mont Blanc, and we have almost roads. Perhaps that, but probably not too much of a difference in terms of height. But we have roads which are almost as high as that peak, with China, exactly. So that will give you an idea, what type of kind of, mountainous regions we are talking about. Similarly, if we talk about the coastline, some of the, very exotic coastline in that whole region. If you talk about some amazing cities like Lahore, for example, or Karachi, or Multan, with all that history they carry. But then again, if you talk about those plains, we have one of the largest irrigation systems in the world, very fertile, beautiful plains. Even like some very exotic deserts. You find, like in Pakistan, even today, as I speak, you could go to a place with a temperature of -30, or you could go to a place with a temperature of +30, in the same country. So that is the variety that you get. And that is why Pakistan was part of that tourism in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the very famous adventure tourism, for instance, or the hippie trail. It was part of the very famous hippie trail as well. People who wanted something out of the ordinary, it was there for them in Pakistan. And there's so many exciting sort of, if somebody's interested in sort of, like Sufism, Pakistan has very, very rich tradition of Sufi culture, the shrines, like those saints, very, very sort of, like some of the most well-known amongst the sort of, those with the philosophical bent of mind. If you talk about music, again, some exotic music, very, very rich. The tradition of Qawwali, for instance. I mean, I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I found here in Germany, people, connoisseurs of music who were great fans of Qawwali, and people like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. But then there's the modern, like segment of music in Pakistan as well. If you talk about fashion, now a lot of people would not really associate Pakistan with sort of, like the top fashion in the world sometimes, because, think Pakistan is perhaps too conservative. But the opposite is true. If you go there, Pakistan has, like there are more fashion shows in Pakistan than I've noticed in Germany, for example. People are very, very conscious about their dressing. I mean, this whole fashion scene is booming in Pakistan. There's so much new creations there, so much synthesis, so much ideas, that it's sort of, like in comparison, the Western fashion houses here seems very monotonous. Like if you talk about art, again, like whether it's calligraphy, whether it's sort of, like those miniature paintings, they're great Mughal art, but great traditions. Handicrafts, carpets, Pakistan is one of the richest sort of, producer, richest in terms of the amalgamation of traditions, of course, of, these type of sort of, like handicrafts. Very, very skilled workmen there. I mean, I can go on and on, seriously, speaking about this side of Pakistan. But I would rather stop here and, and have the governor of Gilgit and Baltistan talk about his beautiful region, because I'm very pleased about that from another perspective as well. And that is that after the war and destruction in Afghanistan, which spilled over in Pakistan, created so much extremism and this challenge of terrorism in Pakistan, we have gone through a period of about last 20 years. Where we had economic losses of about $150-60 billion because of that terrorism. We had huge instability, because of that in our country. 5 million Afghan refugees coming. But the good thing is, in the last 3 years, we have turned a corner. We have defeated the terrorists there. All those terrorists coming from Afghanistan and other countries of the world. They came for Afghan jihad. And the good thing is that the tourism is back in Pakistan. Last year, after many, many years, our tourism figures have reached 2 million. They might not be very big for many European countries, but it's a great start compared to where we were a few years back. In Gilgit-Baltistan, a small region compared to the size of Pakistan, we have had, the governor was telling me, so many tourists last year that at one point in time, there were literally no places to park cars there, But, so I'm glad that we can today talk about that. A Pakistan, which is an emerging Pakistan, where people are sort of, where the GDP growth rate has now become one of the highest in the world, where tourism is back with a bang, where people are like they've started sort of, like focusing more on things like fashion and arts and music and culture and all that, rather than the problems of insecurity. So that, that is the good news emerging from Pakistan. And we have the governor of Gilgit and Baltistan, who's also, by the way, his family has been the ruler for that region, in that region, for 900 years. So that's another beautiful part of our history. He's also what we call the Wali Hunza, like the ruler of Hunza, in that way. So I'm very glad that he'd be here to talk more about that. Thank you.